thank you all for coming for today's inaugural tour of the Presidents at Washington, PA. First, I want to thank Dr. Tom Mainwaring and Dr. Jennifer Harding, who pioneered this project. So you're on a historic campus in a historic town that have grown up around each other and with each other over time. So we're very happy to be here. I will share with you one historical tidbit. As you may know, Washington and Jefferson College began as Washington College here on this land and Jefferson College in Canonsburg. And when the colleges were in the early 19th century beginning to grow in size, they became rivals. And they engaged in what was called the College Wars. So imagine the two most rival colleges you can think of, Army and Navy or something like that. They had great difficulty imagining themselves as partners. But when the Civil War came along, the number of young men in the area declined to such an extent that the two colleges were forced to join, or they would not survive financially. I suspect I'm being joined by presidents, I can see. Welcome to George and to Tom, two of our presidents. I got to tell you, it's not every president's tour that has live historical figures with it. Thank you for joining us, George and Tom. Let me just finish the story of the uniting of Washington and Jefferson colleges. So the two colleges existed in separate communities. They were in financial difficulty, needed to join, but were rivals. So the big question was, where does the United College come to be situated? And so the citizens of Washington and the citizens of Canonsburg were invited to give money to the endowments of the college, and whichever city raised more money, that is where the United College would be joined. The city of Canonsburg in 1865 raised $5,000, which was a handsome sum in 1865. But the citizens of Washington, located on the National Road and as the county seat, raised $50,000 for the endowment of the college. And so Washington and Jefferson, the United College, the home of the presidents, came to Washington, PA as its permanent residence.
Just, I guess, three things I think that it's great to celebrate about Washington through this tour. Number one, we've really got an interesting history. Number two, we've got a great documentation of that history. We worked from original newspapers from the 19th and 20th centuries, and throughout our history we've had newspapers keeping track of everything that has happened, and that's great when you want to go back and figure out what happened. And third, this is a very walkable place, and I think that's what the walking tour really helps to profile. So, all right, without any further ado, I'm going to turn to the first stop, which basically just welcomes us. Welcome. This tour will take you to a variety of sites where American presidents have spoken, stayed, or visited when they have come to Little Washington. Why did 15 presidents come here? For many, it was the fact that the National Road, the primary artery from east to west in the 19th century, came through Washington. Others visited because they had family or friends in the county. Some were campaigning. One president came to Washington because of a woman named Elizabeth Stockdale. Over the next hour, you will learn their stories.
It's hard to imagine what this space looked like back on April 15th, 2008, when Barack Obama came here. This plaza was absolutely filled to the brims. It was a bright, warm day. People were standing on these walls, and there was some kind of a platform erected down there. So it turned out to be a kind of interesting speech because it was not clear at this point who was going to win the Democratic primary. So the Pennsylvania primary, for once, had some real significance.
We named this stop in the shadows of Washington and Jefferson because we thought it would be fun while we're standing here. We would literally be in their shadows. But I guess the thing we want to admit about this part of the tour is, unlike every other stop that represents a president who actually visited Washington, neither George Washington nor Thomas Jefferson ever actually came here. But we didn't feel like we could leave them out, so we made it an executive decision to make them part of the tour. The closest that Washington came to visiting Washington, he came very close, about 12 miles away. He came to visit Miller's Run, which was an area where he owned land. He also, as most people in this area know, was a soldier in the French and Indian War, which also brought him to this region. So he came here, he was in the area, just not physically in Washington. Jefferson didn't even come that close. The closest that he came was he approved the route of the National Road. That was the closest connection we could find. So Taft came, he gave a speech on our international relationships. This was in the middle of World War I, so this was a very important topic at that time. During his speech, he not only referenced the football victories of Washington and Jefferson over Yale, we had beaten them. So he made reference to that in his speech. This is our next stop. This is the site representing the visit of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in October 19th, 1932. At the time, this old main would have been the main classroom space for students. Of course, at that time, the students were all male. And on Wednesdays, they used to go to chapel. And on October 19th, which was a Wednesday, they had a speaker in chapel who was denouncing alcohol. And at this time, alcohol was actually illegal in the United States. This was during the time of Prohibition. So he was on campus basically reinforcing that, alcohol is bad. We decided that our stop for Ulysses S. Grant would be the Lemoyne House because they currently are the home of the Washington County Historical Society, which owns several artifacts that Grant left behind. So that's why we're stopped here. The artifacts are inside. But just to tell you why Grant had such a strong relationship with Washington, his wife's cousin actually lived here. His name was William W. Smith, a very prominent businessman from the 19th century. And he was a friend of Ulysses S. Grant as well because they had served in the Civil War together. When you looked from the Whiskey Rebellion statue to the hill where you saw the house that is now part of Trinity High School, that was William W. Smith's house. It was at that time called Spring Hill. And that is where Ulysses S. Grant came and stayed when he visited. We were able to find 4 different visits. Sometimes he would come and stay for a week or 10 days. So he really got to know the town. The president who's represented by this stop is Harry S. Truman. He stayed here in 1953 with his wife Beth. And it was after he had finished his 8th year in the presidency that he was originally became president when Franklin Roosevelt died in 1945.